Welcome to our second episode of the Paragon Path, the Talisman of the Paladins, where we are going to go over things such as where do Paladins fit on the battlefield, abilities you should know about, skills and things you can get better at, recommended tactics, as well as opinions on opening up Paladin and Anti-Paladin and opinions on the Battlegame night. Stick around, enjoy, and as always, give us a like and subscribe. So, this is our second episode of the Paragon Path. This one is focusing on Paladin. So today with us we have three fantastic guests. We have up in the top corner, I hope everyone's got the same layout. I don't know. The video will have the same layout, but people might not. We have, I'm going to mess your name up, I swear. Kadart Hearts on Marin. Did I get that right?
Kadart Hearts on a Man.
There we go. Okay. Below him, we have Radiant Abir Shale Nifty. And below me, we have someone who has more titles than I care to announce, but Sir Michael Hammer of God. They are all going to introduce themselves a little bit so you guys know where we're coming from, and I'll give them that opportunity now. So we'll start with Kaads.
Hi. Unlike everyone else in here, I am not a knight, but I am a former knight, and during my tenure in knighthood, I earned the honor of Paragon Paladin. Was Master Paladin at the time, but we had the option to convert it, so I did.
Awesome. How about Nifty?
Hi, I'm Nifty. I've been a Knight of Amtgard since 2018. I believe I reached level 6 in the class sometime towards the end of 2019, and so had plenty of time to learn the class and figure out what I loved about it in that time. I am not a Paragon, however.
So
that's all right. You're working hard,
Jory
right?
Jory and I are combining our.
Yes, by our powers combined, we make a single Paragon Paladin Knight.
And lastly, Michael.
Yep, my name is Michael Hammer of God. I started playing Amtgard in 1988. I got knighted in 1991. I started playing Paladin something close to a year after that. And I got my Master Paladin not long after that. The truth is, I do not consider myself a Paragon Paladin necessarily, because while my Masterhood converted like everybody else's, I am not a top-notch Paladin player under V8. I'm an okay Paladin player. If you're a good fighter, you'll do fine. And I am a warlord, so I can still swing a stick okay. And if you've got that in armor, you've got a lot. But I'm not sure you've really got a Paragon. So I will have that caveat. I still think I have good opinions, and I'd like to share them with you.
That is an excellent tie-in to our first question. Which is something that a lot of people ask whenever they do these kind of discussions. What is the difference between a level 6 and a Paragon? What are the big differences when we talk about that person is a Paragon versus they're a good player of the Paladin class? I think it's always important for us to set kind of a parameter or a guideline for what we are looking for at the beginning so that everyone knows kind of what we're aiming for. So what would you guys say is the biggest difference?
So I'm going to throw out something that I think is really important first, which is it's subjective. So a lot of it depends on what the monarch in place at the time thinks the difference between a level 6 and a Paragon Paladin is. The rules give you guidance, and I'm not saying there's nothing, but it's pretty subjective.
I can say that to me, like if I were a monarch or if I were advising a monarch, the difference between a level 6 and a Paragon, it's like the difference between a college graduate and a senior member of a field. Level 6 is just the beginning, and unless you're a prodigy, you've only just learned the basics of your class. Paragon is someone who utilizes their class to the. And to me, what makes a Paragon is, I'll call them the 3 S's, and it's from highest to lowest. And the first S is skill, aka Battlegame prowess. You have to excel in your class. You have to dominate the field while you're playing that class. And the second S is schooling, teaching. You have to actively help people excel at your class. Now, I put this as second priority, even though it is more important. And the reason why that is if you don't excel at your class or know how to excel at your class, how can you teach other people? And the final S is my personal favorite, and that's style. That means constantly looking the part and doing RP things around. Now, I say character and not class because, as we all know, in V8 and in AppGuard, that's pretty well open. Like you can play a wizard as an alchemist, for example. But for Paladin, I've never seen someone who plays Paladin not roleplay anything else but a Paladin.
So I agree, and I think that that set of 3 S's is a very succinct way of putting it. What I've seen as Monarch, or watching other Monarchs, is how much focus they put on the 3 can depend quite a bit. I've definitely seen Monarchs who don't care very much at all about the middle one.
Well, if
Right.
you like how succinct, Kaads was, I can actually put it a little more succinctly.
Okay.
What up time?
It's my my opinion on Paragons is the same across the board. What makes a Paragon over a level 6 of anything is when everyone on the other team looks at you, sees you gearing up, and says, "Oh, God, they're playing whatever class again." If they see you putting on your armor or sliding on that belt favor or that sash, and they go, "Ah, crap, he's playing a Paladin today." Ugh.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's wrong, but I kind of want it to be, because I discourage that kind of activity in any of our parks, right? If any player does that and the rest of the other team goes, "Oh my God, I don't want to do this," that's a issue I would like to discourage, not encourage, right?
That's
I
fair.
mean,
That's a
I
fair
understand your point completely, and I think you're right, but that's why I said I wish you weren't.
That's totally
that
fair.
is true. And I think later on we're going to get into tips on how to not break your park if you are really good at the game.
Yes.
But pretty much
I touched on that a little bit when I was thinking of my answers, actually.
But pretty much all, like a lot of the Paragons I've gotten, people have told me that when I got them, it was basically a message saying, "Please stop playing this class. Play something else. Dear God, just stop playing this."
I mean, it's an ultimate top tier thing to kind of have. You show up, you play it better than everyone else, and then they kind of say like, "All right, move on to something else, please."
Well, and if you're that good at anything, you need to only play it in big environments where it doesn't break things.
Yes, that is another point we'll have later.
Yeah, sorry, we're getting off track.
No, we are totally fine. We got an hour. It's only been 8 minutes. We are good. So this one was requested by Kaads, actually. What are your guys' favorite examples in either fiction or historical of a paladin? Like, what do you kind of model yourself after?
Tell me, you want to go first, or should I go first?
I'm happy to go first.
Okay, you go first.
So I actually have 2 examples of Paladin type characters that I think are really excellent, and I know I'm stealing one of these from Michael, and I know he'd agree with me that one of the most amazing representations of Paladins in fantasy literature, I think, is Paxenarian, who is a character written by Elizabeth Moon. I cannot for the life of me remember what the name of the series is. I believe, is it The Deed of Paxenarian?
The Deed of Paxenarian, that's
The
right.
Deed of Paxenarian, and she's very archetypal of a paladin character. She starts off as a nobody sheep farmer's daughter, and you get to witness her journey as she becomes a holy warrior. And it's a really, really beautiful story, and it's told really well with lots of great military realism. But that's sort of the archetype of paladin. And my other favorite paladin type character is actually Kaladin Stormblessed from the Stormlight Archives. And one of the reasons that I believe Brandon ended up settling on that name is because Kaladin rhymes with paladin. And he's sort of the he takes the concept of protection, protecting everyone, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even protecting those you hate, as long as it is right. And he takes that to the extreme, and it's a character that's really resonated with me a lot, with his struggles and how he goes about performing those duties and achieving his goals. So those are my two top paladin type characters, if you will.
Well, that's okay because you took both of mine, but I'm actually okay because I got backups. I got backups everywhere. In fact, the first one I'll throw out was one I always aspired to when I was a brand new paladin, and that's King Arthur. Now, the Arthur mythos has lots of variations, and in some of them he's kind of pathetic, and you root for Lancelot, and true love is important. And in other variations, he's sort of wronged, but doing his best to run his kingdom anyway. And that's the one I think of where he's more like a paladin. And then the other one that I'll throw out, I think Superman is an excellent example of the paladin archetype.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't exactly have a deity for the old D&D classic version of paladin, but his commitment to higher ideals is exactly the kind of thing you expect from a paladin.
I can totally get behind that. That is, I can't believe I hadn't considered like Superman as a paladin. That's awesome.
I have three. I had two, but Mikey's Superman kind of threw in another one for me. So first is Cecil from Final Fantasy IV. He's the one who actually introduced me to what a paladin is. It's my first exposure as a teenage nerd about paladins, and like he starts the game as a Dark Knight, does terrible things for his kingdom, and really starts to feel a lot of remorse in his actions. And he goes on a kind of a journey of redemption and becomes a paladin. It's a really great. The second is a game series called Quest for Glory, and it's really hard to explain in words because they don't really put it in words. But in that, a paladin is something of a hidden class. In that series, it's kind of cool because you can import your character from game to game, and you unlock the paladin class by doing a lot of hidden good deeds in one of the games. And you can't create a paladin, you import your paladin. And the paladin is kind of portrayed as individuals who travel the world and defeat evil and keep the peace. They're kind of portrayed as like a Jedi in a swords and sorcery setting. Plus, they get a flaming sword, which is cool. And the third example is, and this is kind of like a no-brainer for me, Captain America. I think of, like, if I'm trying to role-play a paladin in a D&D setting, I think of what Captain America can do. Like, I've seen a lot of people role-play paladins, like, who are really preachy and stuff like that, but I see Captain America as being like, okay, you guys are going to go and do all this stuff that I consider immoral. More power to you. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go do the hard thing over here.
Oh, and Captain America is such a great example of how to do things that are moral as opposed to doing things that are legal. And that particular take on paladinism, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big change, I believe, in the most recent Pathfinder. They outlined that, specifically stating, like, lawful does not mean you follow the country you're in's law, because if you know the king's corrupt, you can still go overthrow him because it's morally correct. Which I think was a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's hard to know, though, right? They might be corrupt. You might just think they're corrupt.
Oh,
perspective.
One of my favorite things about, like, I think it was an old D&D book where when they're defining the alignment system, one of the statements threw a wrench into my whole way of thinking. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And that's what alignment is. Robin Hood. And they portrayed him as lawful good. And the reason is because he's not being a bandit that's, living outside the kingdom because he wants to be. He used to be a soldier of King Richard. And when in many tales of Robin Hood, when he overthrows the corrupt law system, he ascends to be a noble. So he is not chaotic good. He is not against law and order. It's just that the system of law and order in his kingdom is corrupt, and he's fighting it. It's the only way he.
So I don't want to get off on a tangent, but Robin is a lot like Arthur in that there's such a huge corpus of work about him that there's a lot of different versions.
Oh, definitely. There are versions where he's just like the bandit, the happy-go-lucky.
But I understand your point. I will not divert.
All right. So our next question is gonna be interesting here because you guys are all kind of at three different stages of your Paragon Paladinhood path. So I'm going to start from the newest Paladin and go backwards. But what are 3 things you wish you knew when you started playing Paladin and started progressing on this Paragon path? So Nifty, you are the newest.
Okay, so the thing that really... The thing I wish I'd learned or had known beforehand is that your job isn't to wreck face. Your job is to make sure that faces and their wreckage is prevented. That's kind of my number one. I can expound on that if you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I am kind of the belief that in a small to medium park setting or battlefield setting, which is most parks, you don't need to run and dominate the field. You absolutely can. But one of the things that you are best at is being a second line or a defensive fighter, and you need to make sure that your team is supported, that you've got healing capabilities, you've got armor capabilities, you've got so much of that stay back and defend that you don't need to, it's not my job to go out and crush the opposition. It's my job to make sure that we are not crushed by the opposition. I think to maximize efficacy with this class, armor is a must. There's a lot that you can do if you're a solid fighter, but not necessarily not every paladin raised is a great fighter, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Everyone brings something new and delightful to the battlefield, but armor can really, really be a leveler, if that, or what's the word I'm looking for here?
Equalizer?
An equalizer, thank you. Armor can be a great equalizer with the right person. And the last thing that I really wish someone had pounded into my head for me is, do not forget that you have awe. Awe is such a good ability, and I cannot believe how often I forget to use that spell. Like towards the end of gameplay before everything shut down, I had really started picking up use of it, and oh, what a game changer. So those are the 3 things.
I mean, as a Paragon Bard, I should shame you for not using awe, as it is literally like I should have it tattooed on my arm of like, this is what it does.
Well, and that's actually the thing is, maybe you or Zach or Broton had showed up to park, and someone was using awe over and over again, and I kept forgetting that I had awe, and then I stopped, I took a breath, I pulled up the character sheet, I'm like, oh, come on, I'm immune to command, I can use this spell, what am I doing? And all of a sudden the game completely changed. It was awesome. Yeah, huge quality of life improvement for me was finally remembering those important details. And that was about 7 months before everything shut down, so I got quite good at using those abilities towards the end of gameplay.
So moving backwards, Kaads.
All right. So one of the first things people might tell you is that Paladin is a bad class. And I've heard the argument that because it's like the Knights, it's just a worse class, and the Knights experience is supposed to make up for it. Don't believe a word of that. It's an objectively ignorant opinion.
Horsefish.
My fighting company, They Aren't Gone, fields Paladins regularly. We won Bridge Wars and Keep last year. My Phoenix League team, Stack Deck, fields Paladins regularly. I think we're doing something right. Paladins are amazing. They can wear the second highest amount. Oh, go ahead.
That's a holdover from V7 and earlier versions, where it was much more true because armor was much less good.
Agreed.
I mean, I agree with you. The opinion's totally bunk under the current rules. But a lot of people still say it because they don't understand V8 and they remember V7. And it's like 10 years ago. You'd think old people would... I am old people, but you'd think some other old people would catch on.
And you touched on armor being like less good, and it's amazing now. Paladins can wear the second highest amount of armor in every class in the game. They can use any melee weapon in a shield. They get 2 immunities, which is on par with our Barbarian, and I think they get better in immunities than what Barbarian gets. They get mild support spells, heal and resurrect. They get awe, and that's already been covered. It's the fastest offensive verbal in the game.
Yep.
And on top of all that, they get pro mags. It's like, what? That's it's a broken enchantment. So what go-to abilities you need to know for your class is pretty much everything I just said. It's a hybrid class. You need to be a hybrid. You need to do everything that your class can do in order. And the big thing I'll say about the subject is to really emphasize something that Jory pointed out, that Shale pointed out. And I've had a conversation with people from other parks that say, yeah, Paladin's bad. I play Paladin. It doesn't have an impact on the field. And I'm like, okay, the first question I always narrow in on, because I know that the answer to the question is, how much armor do you wear? And the answer is always none. And it's like, what? As I said, Paladins can wear the second highest armor of any class in the game. It's a massive advantage the Paladin is, and you're wasting it if you're not wearing armor. Would you play Archer without a bow? Don't play Paladin without armor. I cannot stress this enough. Get armor.
Warriors who only have a couple of options to have really comfortable, easy to fight in armor that's also worth 6. Paladins have a ton of options. Get one. Otherwise, play a class that doesn't need it until you get one, because you don't want to be one of those guys who doesn't like your class because you're underplaying it. So now the experiences that I'm going to talk about are ancient and only apply under the V7 rules. So these are more for amusement. But one thing I wish I had known back then was just how important sharing immunities was. Being able to share them at the right time and in the right way was huge. And then the other one is almost kind of a joke. But back then when we had mass spells, the Paladins were immune to the mass spells. So what would happen is they'd cast Wind or Doomsday, and they'd kill off or blow away every single person on your team except you, and then they'd murder your ass. Which that's fair, but if we're talking about things I wish I'd known.
So I have an amusing story to go off of that. We've also used that as an advantage because the Paladins would remain on the field, and guess who else would remain on the field? All the other people on the team with pro magic. So we'd surround the other team, we'd cast Wind, and it would blow away everyone except for like the 2 people with pro magic, and the Paladins would just whip their ass. It was awesome.
No, that's a fair point. Depending on who casts it and how. We're just talking about things that I wish I'd known.
Oh yeah.
That's cool.
And it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply at all under V8. It's just why it's a funny story.
But I mean,
you didn't miss much, John. You really didn't. Like there's a lot of really good about it. There's a lot of really good about it, but it was not newbie friendly.
No, I've read the book.
Well, and I'm going to mention another big difference between Paladin now and Paladin then, because I don't actually think Paladins were terrible then. Like they weren't as good as they are now, but they got their rep for not being very good at a time when it was legit. They weren't excellent. But the difference is, and I was talking about this with Merrick earlier. Back then, if you'd asked me what the best thing that a Paladin brings to a team, number 1 might still have been the armor, but number 2 was 3 resurrect. And that's not true today, where there's lots of resurrection available, and lives are not an especially limited resource in any game. That's not an important part of the Paladin's kit. It's okay, right?
Back then they had non-magical resurrect too.
No, that's a good point. Get those guys in pro mag up. But often you're literally checking your res count for the team, and sure, bringing a healer with 8 is great, but bringing 3 who can also go wreck shop is pretty useful.
It's a big difference. So we've hit on this a little bit already, but the next question is, where do you guys see Paladin as it fits on the battlefield? And we'll start from small and then medium and large. Small, I'm thinking we have like under 10 players on the field. Medium, we're looking at, duchies and baronies kind of park, and large, we're looking at, like keep size interkingdom events, these really massive battlefields. So we'll start with small. Where do you guys think the Paladin fits on the small field?
Honestly, I think a Paladin on a small field, you might as well play a warrior. Typically with small fields, you're going to have really fast games, and spells like heal that some people can arguably get off pretty quick, and spells like resurrect. they are not as powerful as they would be on a larger battlefield, and that's not, you know, not to say that they're not useful, but I think for in that instance, you're mostly just an armored person who could, you know, with lots of melee versatility.
Depends on what that other team's got, because if they've got caster, your pro mag may go further than the warrior shit.
I actually, you know what? I stand corrected.
I mean, I'm not dissing warriors, because warriors an excellent class in almost all cases, but there's definitely going to be times when you'll go further than a warrior will. I think the other thing to always pay attention to in a small park is what class is going to ruin the fun for other people.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
then you can talk about, is your role to be successful? Well, if it is, then your role in a small park is probably to bring the thunder to the point of attack where your pro mag or your immunities make you less vulnerable than other players. And usually in a small game, there's literally one flank where that's true and the other isn't, and it's your job to go to that flank.
I stand corrected. You make excellent points.
I'd say that Paladin brings, I'd say Paladin brings a lot to the table, no matter what the size of the game. They have a lot of longevity when it comes to their immunities and their armor, and they have their big abilities that they can only use once. And if we compare it to the other fighting classes, like warrior is significantly less powerful without their ancestral armor. They're still good, but they're less powerful. Paladin without their pro mag, they still got immunities. They still have they can still do stuff. I'd say that when it comes to longevity, Paladin's the best of the fighting classes, because barbarian, they do not have longevity. And
I
warrior
suppose.
kind of,
Sorry.
I
suppose. Okay, I'll get my thought out really quick, and then it's back to you. I suppose my answer came from the perspective of my personal park and how our games had been run for the entirety of my time playing Paladin, where I found that the smaller games being a Paladin did not actually benefit me a whole lot. So that comes from personal experience as opposed to a wider perspective.
Yeah, I found in the smaller games, the pro mag matters a lot more, as does the Oz. Because as we all know, the larger the game, the less effective offensive verbals are, just because, you know, there's a lot of chaos and stuff like that. Not to say that people don't take them, but, you know, people don't take them because they don't know you're casting on. So you have to add like a minute to every verbal to let them know that, hey, you were odd back there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and if you've got even skill, you can beat two guys always by awing one of them and murdering the other one. Because your armor is going to beat their skill pretty much every time.
So small battlefields, we just talked about medium battlefield. We're talking, for examples from up here, they'd be like CC, Crimson Circle, and Ethereal Tides, between like 30 and 50 people on the field. Where do we see them sitting at that point?
I'm personally of the opinion that they make an excellent second line fighter, first or second line fighter, in those sort of scenarios where you can absolutely be on that front line and I guess, to repeat myself, wrecking face. You know, 4 points of armor makes a huge difference, and with the melee weapon versatility, I mean, you could start off with a sword and board, you can move on to a pole arm, whatever the occasion requires. Your ability to go and modify your kit in the middle of a battle game is you know, super duper helpful. And excuse me, I think that the ability to heal also makes you an excellent, or heal, res, extend your immunities, makes you an excellent resource for that second line, so that when your buddies in front of you do get knocked down, the people in the next line have a better chance of standing up against whatever strike force made it through.
One pro tip I'll give you for getting to know the Paladin class, especially for medium or larger battle games, is get to know what your immunities are. Like really, really drill into you that you're immune to command and death, and know what spells, like what cookie cutter spells, what bread and butter spells that the people who cast command and death are. Like bards, like your company's completely immune to bards.
We have two spells.
Yeah. So That's a big thing, and the reason why you want to know your immunities is because I guarantee you other people won't. I've seen veterans screw that up all the time of what a paladin is immune to, and cast command spells and death spells on them. They're like, oh yeah, paladin's immune to that. Yeah, take advantage of that. Really get to know your.
So I agree very strongly with what Denny said there. It was literally what I was going to say, but I will throw another caveat out there. And I can't do it anymore at 50 something because I don't have the foot speed. But the fact is, a great spot for a paladin is work out on that flank, use the javelins we talked about earlier to threaten, but don't push until one of those casters gets exposed, or maybe even gets exposed with a buddy in light armor, and then go in and wreck them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Bards are perfect for it because they've got very little for you. Meaning that if they're looking at another guy, even for a second, and you push on them, there's an okay chance they'll use the wrong fucking thing. And that half second is all it takes for you to get there and finish him.
Oh, yeah.
We have shove and stun, and that's all. That's the Bard's kit against the Paladin. That's all.
So I feel like in medium games especially, it's not, hey, go push a flank where you're going to have a strength against the whatever the opponent's got. But it's feel it out, look for a chance to push hard.
Makes sense. You're not immediately on that first line that's just running and going, but you're right behind them. The second line.
And the javelin thing, I would say, applies to warriors too. The same thing. You want to use that javelin to pick out the spot, because then they still got to think about you, even if you're not rushing.
Throwies and ranged weapons make a huge difference when used correctly.
Oh yeah,
it's especially in large games, because there's going to be a lot of people who aren't paying attention, and that's where ranged weapons.
Oh yeah. An excellent example of that is Timmet. He is just a little monster with those little pucks.
Well, and I will make another equipment comment. There are lots of people who can make good javelins that fly well and reasonably far. There are also lots of people who make shitty javelins that don't fly very far at all. If you aren't in the first group, go to somebody who is and get your javelins from them.
Yeah, ask a DAG player. Dagger here regularly uses javelins, so every DAG group usually has someone who knows how to make the javelins and knows how to throw.
The javelin guy.
Yeah, no, you're right. Javelin has there's lots of good javelins in DAG because everybody needs them.
Hmm.
It's a big benefit. I think that gets overlooked in a lot of classes. I mean, especially from like week to week when you're playing on a regular basis, you miss some of those little things at the top of your class where it's like you have access to these throwies, you have access to this kind of armor. It's a huge deal to pay attention to that text at the top. So going back onto that real large field, we're talking Keep, Castlemania, Spring War. We're like 200 plus people easy. What are we doing with Paladin there?
Let's see. I would say, well, first of all, forget your awe, unless you get into a small skirmish, because you're probably not going to be able to get it off or do anything like that.
Or they won't be able to hear you.
Yeah, and that's also a perfect time. The large games are a perfect time to pull out the polearm.
I was waiting for my yep. Polearm time.
Yep, pole.
Yeah, being able to stab a guy way over there and then heal your buddy right next to you, can't go wrong.
Yeah, no, and I agree that poles are an excellent way, especially if you can't have the flank. I will say that one of my theories of Amp-Guard combat that goes beyond Paladin is the better player you are, the more advantage your team gets from having you on the flank. Because you have more choices. Now, you do have to play smarter to be successful on the flank, but getting those extra choices, getting more chances to make some mismatches. And Paladin's a class that's still pretty good at making mismatches. So if you're not going to be a pole Paladin, take that flank if you can.
And when it comes to fighting, I'll say don't underestimate yourself. I've met people on two ends of the spectrum who are good fighters. Number one are people who are complete garbage in the tournament. They won't even place, but on the field they can be monsters. They can be they murder machines. And on the other end of the spectrum, I've seen people who are warlords who dominate tournaments there, but they get really ridiculous tunnel vision on the field. And when you're playing Paladin, in my opinion, in a class game, the first kind of fighter I'd rather have on my team than the second kind of fighter. No disrespect intended to anyone who focuses on turn.
No, and I'm with you. In battle games, you want people who've got field vision and understand tactics, and that's more important than how good they are with a sword. The fact is, both things are important.
Mm-hmm. I agree with everything you guys are saying.
It's not like we started the hot takes yet.
No.
Wow. I also have not had the chance to play on a large battlefield as a paladin yet.
We'll have to get you that experience once the
I
world opens.
I really want to.
It's all right. I think I've only played V8 Paladin on a large field a handful of times. Not often.
It was really fun watching that line of paladins in one of the last few Romans versus Barbarians game we did. It was Zach and Raph and Chewy, and there was just 5 or 6 of them. They all had javelins. They all had their shields. Oh, that was cool to watch. That was, Flight of the Valkyries cool.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. We got a guest star in the shot for a second.
TR.
The good boy.
Sorry about that.
You are totally fine. So, moving on to the next question. And we've hit on this a couple times. Go-to abilities. Like, what are the things you need to know in the class? We went over, the javelins are really important. Your awe, you've got to remember you have it. And your immunities. That was a huge thing. Are there any specifics on those or any other topics that you really want to know as you take your Paragon Path forward for Paladin?
I just want to reiterate that you have the awe spell. I mean, I'm not the only new Paladin to forget that thing exists. It can make a huge difference in those small to medium park days. They really, really can. I have found in my own experience that extend immunities can make a difference if you put it on the right partner. I've put it on people who I thought would do great with it, and then they go and they get stabbed in the back because they acquired tunnel vision on the objective or on killing someone who'd been bothering them, and then they lose it. I'm like, well, why did I, use that charge ×5 ability on you if you're just gonna lose it right away? You got to be really smart about where you pass off those immunities, and I don't even believe it gives them immunity. I believe it's just a blessing. Is that correct?
The resistance?
It just gives you.
Resistance, which is for all intents and purposes a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Resistance is super good if you use it exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it's a limited ability, I mean, yes, it's rechargeable, but it's got a pretty high recharge. So I think of it as more limited than not.
Yeah.
Those you want to use in the right situation, right? So you want to put it on somebody who's fast enough to go run down a guy who's primarily going to use the thing that you're going to make him immune to, and then send him to go do it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same way if you play Scout, you use your one-shot immunities.
Yeah.
Right? You use them to go take down the guy who's using that thing and do it right away. And that applies even more to your most limited immunity. If you get good advantage out of your pro mag when you've got it up, you can do a fair bit of damage. On the other hand, if you get stuck using it and they hit you with a bunch of melee, it sort of gets wasted. And a lot of how successful you'll be is knowing your spots. And knowing your spots really means making your spots, right? Look at the field, see a place where you can really put a pro mag to good use, and then rapidly use it and go do it right away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same with any limited ability for any class. But for Paladins, the pro mag is your best limited ability. It's the one that's the most important you get right if you can.
And that actually transitions well to what I wanted to talk about, and that's pro mag. Now, Pro Mag, you can use it on yourself, and in some cases, it's best used on yourself. Like if you're the best fighter in your team, the only one with armor on your team, and like the biggest threat is a magic user. But most of the time, especially in larger games, if you cast that on yourself, you're kind of wasting the potential of it because you already have, as a paladin, 2 immunities. You're already immune to command. You're already immune to death. A warrior, on the other hand, who has their full 6 points of armor, that benefits them so much more than it does you. So remember that Amtgard's a team game, and Paladin is definitely a team player.
I would like to make a comment to that point. Is warriors are already pretty high value targets as far as your dispel magic goes, from opposing wizards, opposing scouts, healers. I mean, everyone looks for the warrior and they always ask them, do you have ancestral armor up, because they want to bust that shit down right away. And so I agree that putting a pro mag on a warrior can be an excellent choice. It is also it's a high risk, high reward choice, I suppose. Yeah. You might drop it on him and it might get nuked off in 15 seconds. So it is a good choice, but it is a good choice that comes with a high risk.
Yeah, and when fighting a high awareness team, they're going to be looking for the Paladin and Pro Mag. So make sure to use that to your tactical advantage, and maybe give your Pro Mag to someone who they don't expect.
Yeah, that's a good point. Somebody who's pretty good at staying on. Maybe that one goes. Maybe Pro Mag goes on an archer. Someone who's got pretty good longevity, or
as long as it's somebody who's going to be in range for the magic, right?
Yes. Well, that's true.
Archer might not be. I think if you've got somebody skirmishy like an assassin, that's a better bet.
See,
that's actually that's an excellent point.
If we're talking about the sneaky option, I think it's not the archer who's going to be sneaky from a long way off.
You're right. The assassins, actually, I kind of agree with the assassin point. To your point, John, about you said the scout, I actually disagree, because scouts are almost as big a target as warriors, and that everyone knows scouts can track, they've got dispel. I mean, scouts are an incredibly versatile and dangerous enemy to go up against. I think
that's the player. I mean, I love scout. I love scout myself, but the book nationally is scout's a crappy class. So unless the player is good, the scout gets ignored.
It's okay. Paladin's a crappy class too.
Yeah, that's not true.
I've heard that, but not nearly as often as I've heard it about scout.
That's fair.
Yeah.
The reason I think scout is if you put it on a paladin, or not a paladin, sorry, a warrior, the warrior then misses out on their shake it off. Not their shake it off. Sorry, their wicked flee when I pursue, because it's a spirit magic. The scout has much less spirit that they rely on as their base. That's why I was thinking put it on something that has the next best amount of armor, because I mean it's 6, 4, 3, and some 2s.
I think there's some 2s. Yep.
Because it's assassin and archer.
And scout's not bad, because scout also has a place to play as a skirmisher. Medium throws aren't as good as small throws to be a great skirmisher, but they will take you a long way.
All right, so do we have any more on the need to know? Yeah, continue.
Nah, go ahead. My next point can be brought up in one of your later points. In fact, I was planning.
Cool. All right, so we went over the abilities and things you need to know. What are some skills you guys are either focusing on now or focused on very heavily when you're going for your Paragon to get better at Paladin? Are there things that you can focus on outside the game to improve your in-game prowess?
I would like to open with this.
I personally believe in really hamming up the role play. I think that improvement of gameplay can really be made with just hamming it up, and I'm just gonna keep repeating myself. So I don't even know what else to say about it.
And in Polaris, there's a lot of opportunities to ham up your role play. In fact, we had a conversation unrelated, and I only want to touch on this briefly, but like there's been a few of us leaders who have been trying to encourage dragons being handed out for high amounts of role play, because the rule book actually gives role play as an example to give out dragons. And unlike a lot of other kingdoms, Polaris has a lot of really good opportunities to really ham up the role play. You could be an encounter in Dungeon Day, in GAC. There's lots of NPCs where you can role play. And if you really ham up the experience, like, it can make those events all the better.
I think that there's lots to practice without even going into the fact that melee classes get more benefit from just the pure martial practice of Amp-Guard than caster classes do, which is obviously true. Some of the skills that you use a lot as a paladin that maybe you don't use as much for some of the other melee classes can be improved with practice. I talked about javelin throwing already. Mm-hmm. That's one of them. But truthfully, there are ways to play paladin and be effective without being real good with a stick. But you should definitely make sure you are very good at battle gaming if you're going to do that. Right? Denny already brought this up, that being able to see the field, predict, work with your teammates to make best advantage of your abilities, and all those things that make someone a skilled battle gamer can often be more important than pure stick skill. I still contend that if you're going to be an excellent paladin, you'd love to have both. But one of them's a very, very long journey, and the other's only a very long journey. But if we're talking about what you should do to improve, those things shouldn't be forgotten. Obviously, understanding every spell that is either command or death. You need to know that, and you need to know it in the front of your mind, because you don't want to be caught thinking, wait a minute, is that one command or death? And
in fairness, the V8 rules has made that a pretty easy one, because the school is in the incantation of the spell, which is part of how I ended up learning and really familiarizing myself with those immunities, was when people would, I command thee, I was like, oh, hey, I don't have to listen to that one.
I agree with you completely, and that fixes it in small games. Mm-hmm. It doesn't do much in large games, because we all know we can't hear the incantations. You usually know about it the first time when somebody else, I got you with X, I swear I did.
Yeah.
And then you look at them, you're like, yeah, they're close enough, they probably did.
Yep.
Well, and especially if they go, I got you with some spell that doesn't have the word command or death in it, you're like, oh, okay, and you just your brain just shuts off for a moment. You're like, okay, I'll just take that, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's why I think it's important that you just know these spells, know the ones you're immune to cold. If you're playing Paladin under the current rules, you've played a few other classes already anyway. Probably some of our casters, and you probably already know those spells. But make sure you know any of the ones you don't.
Yeah. Got over 100 credits in Wizard or something like that, so I'm pretty familiar with that Wizard spell list.
And also know what spells other classes are capable of casting. Like I said, Bard, they pretty much 90% of their spells are command and death. But like Wizards have, some sorcery spells and
fire spells or flame.
A big part of being a Paragon in any class is knowing what your opponents are capable of, like knowing your enemy and anticipating your enemy. So you'll look at this guy and be like, okay, he's capable of doing this to screw me over. And then in the middle of it, like he points at you and starts casting Hold Person, and then you're like, what? Why is he doing that? I'm immune to that. And then you charge him and kill him, and you just beat him with your knowledge. Has nothing to do with you being a better fighter. Has nothing to do with any of that. If you beat someone with that kind of a knowledge, that's a good thing that sets a Paragon apart from.
Well, and another thing that I think is super important, and why there's a reasonable number of people who get one Paragon, and then a few years later they get another Paragon, and they get another Paragon, is they understand battle games sort of deeply. And they love battle games deeply, which makes them not just understand them, but talk about them with their friends all the time. Just spend a lot of time talking shop and looking for combos and trying to figure out new ways to use spells and reading what the meta is. All of that stuff gives you a leg up to be a Paragon in any class. It's just a fact. And there's two people on this call who are exactly like that. And if you don't know who you are, but the fact is that's a huge advantage in Paragon for anything. is that excitement about battle gaming. You want to care about it. You want to talk about it on your drive to and fro from park. So you're thinking about it. It's in your mind. You're percolating, because that's how it's easy to make these decisions in real time, because you've already talked about the decisions 5 or 6 times, and it's very easy to say, this is a slight wrinkle on the thing we talked about, I do X. Right? Your brain just does that automatically instead of having to stop and go, this does that, okay, I'll do X.
Mm-hmm. This is the
one
second
thing I want to
podcast
talk
we've
about.
done.
Yeah.
Continue, Daddy.
One thing I want to really talk about this, because it's what outside of game powers and abilities, and I really want to touch on something here, and that's armor, and that's and we've talked about it at length, but I really want to say that when I tell someone to go and get armor and wear this armor as a class, how complicated doing that is. It's not a very simple request. Like, first of all, we're not even thinking about how armor costs money to buy. Okay, like I've met a lot of people who buy an armor kit because they want to play a class with armor, and they wear it like maybe once a year, because arming it up, lugging it to their park every week, and maintaining the armor is a pain in the ass. But if you want to be a Paragon Paladin or Paragon any armor class, you're going to have to be a lot more diligent. You're going to learn that stainless steel is worth the extra price. So you're not spending a grand total of like dozens of hours with sandpaper and CLR. Once I had a mini cement mixer full of sand that used to tumble chainmail shirts, stuff like that to think about. So why do you want to maintain your armor? Why do you want to wear it week after week? Because you need to get used to wearing your armor. Conditioning in armor is a skill. Fighting in armor is another skill. If I'm only wearing my armor once a year, I'm not going to be used to moving and fighting in that armor. I'm going to be a lot less effective and a lot more tired on the field. And if you get used to fighting in armor, you're going to find that fighting in armor is a completely different game. Like, if we're on a ditch field and you make an all or nothing stab at me like this, I have to block that or I'm dead. But even if they're dead too, I'm still dead. But if I'm wearing armor, I'll just take it to the chest and kill you. Mend is one of the best indirect kill spells of the game. So I can't really emphasize this enough. Get armor. You're gonna, like, in playing an armor class, you're going to be an armor nerd. You're gonna learn how riveting works. You're gonna learn how maintaining your armor and cleaning rust off works. Like, all that crazy stuff.
Well, I'm going to go a step further. Like, I agree with everything you've said, but if you're going to mostly purchase your armor, I'm that kind of player. I mostly purchased my armor over many years in AmpGuard. You need to accept the fact that you're going to buy some pieces that the fit isn't perfect, and you got to take them back and get them done right. If you can't do it yourself, and because often, even if you do a lot of measurements, and the most recent set I bought, I think I gave the guy 30 measurements, and he took a t-shirt of my chest wrapped in duct tape to have the exact shape of it. Like, he really worked hard. I still had to take that back for a couple of adjustments. So if you're building your own, some of that you can do yourself, but it still has to be done. So you buy the armor, you shake it down a few times, then you get it adjusted and get it right. If you're building your own, you've got to accept the fact that your armor is not likely to be perfect on the first build, unless you've made an awful lot of suits first. And take the time to get it right. If you're going to be a Paragon, you've got to commit to it. And it's sort of like if you were trying to get a Paragon Archer, you wouldn't do it with a Kmart bow.
Yeah, I know. I was roommates with Balder. He was on our last podcast, and when he was playing around with Warrior, he literally did like everyday stuff around the house in chainmail. Just he's like 6 hours and just straight up chainmail for whatever purpose, just to get used to it. And that made a big difference once he got on the field. He put it on. He knew what he was doing. It didn't feel like I'm weighted down. You're up there ready to go. The other thing on abilities that we've noticed, there's a group of us that have focused on getting Paragon, playing just like one-on-one stick tag with each other and then having a third party or the opposite party yell a spell name at you, and you have to yell the incant back before you do another strike, has been a really interesting way to like quick fire your spells, so that they say something to you, you get ready to say it, you can strike again, because otherwise you're just sitting there defending yourself in a stupor.
It works fine if you're a good defensive fighter.
Yeah, I mean, you get good one way or the other.
It does sound fun though. I like that.
Actually, I really like that. That sounds like a great exercise.
It's entertaining. It gets really confusing when you have to remember a spell list that the other person is focusing on. So like if Balder was going for Wizard and I was going for Bard, he has to remember my spell list and I have to remember his. It helps with the what Kaads said, where you have to know what your opponents have. If you know what they have, you can counter it, or you can know what you have that is weak to it or countering it. This is the second podcast we've had where we've said, like, know yourself and your opponents better than they know themselves, and you'll win every time, because there's not much of an answer to I know the game better than you in fighting. Like, it works. Moving on to a related topic is tactics. What are some recommended tactics? Michael's talked about the flanks a lot. I also tagged in here target acquisition. Bards are, Kaads has said multiple times, the weakest thing to you. Like, as a Paragon Bard, if I see a Paragon or a Paladin on the field at all, I walk the other direction, because I have 2 spells for him and I don't always take them. And it's like I have an army of spells for other people. Someone else deal with the Paladin. I'm not going to do it.
I've actually found my greatest success at my own park and visiting elsewhere is being the Bard Hunter. Bard hunting is always fun. I've also found that when I use my Pro Mag on myself, Kaads, I end up being the Wizard Hunter too. And I also found that when I take the time to armor up, I also end up being the foil to their heavily armored fighter. I found that as a 4-point Paladin, I can usually beat out any 4 to 6 point warrior that lines up against me. That comes down to a couple of things. Well, I suppose it mostly comes down to I am a stronger fighter than they are. When we're both armored and with similar amounts of armor, it usually comes down to skill. And
they're all terrible at fighting lefties.
That also is a benefit, and they really should get used to it, because I've been left-handed this whole time. You'd think they'd be used to me by now.
I don't feel sorry for them.
I don't. So that is the point I would make. Is I found that my target acquisition ends up being armor, because I can outfight them, bards because they can't touch me, and wizards because it's fun. You can't hear you, Denny.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, paladins are a really great anti-caster. And just to say what before, there's nothing wrong with casting Pro Mag on yourself. In fact, there's a lot of times where it's the optimal thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
absolutely,
especially on small fields. Especially like if you're the only one on your team, if you're like the MVP on your team and you're the only one with armor, then yeah, you're probably going to be casting that Pro Mag on yourself.
Oh yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've told Rayhawk no thank you when he's asked me if I want a blessing against him. I'm like, I've got Pro Mag, I'm okay.
One thing that I'll say is if the MVP on the other team, especially on a small field, is like a wizard or a druid, and he's constantly threatening you with that dispel, sometimes it's just a good idea to take that dispel.
Just take that dispel. You still got 4 points of armor. What are they going to do? Stab you?
Yeah.
Especially if you're rushing him while he's dispelling. Yeah, that's a win.
Oh. Yeah, exactly. Take that dispel, kill him, and now like the rest of your team might be, the rest of their team.
Although truthfully, a lot of that depends on the scenario. And I'm sure everybody knows that. There are plenty of scenarios where getting a kill, even on their MVP, doesn't push your win condition very far. Especially games with a fast repop or a condition where deaths are not very valuable.
Which we have a culture of, especially at our park.
In Polaris in general, fast respawns is a very popular thing.
Well, they're pretty common everywhere, to be truthful. Like we've reached a spot where that's one of the weaknesses of V8 is that it was designed with the assumption that death was going to put you out for a fairly long time, and it just doesn't very much anymore in a lot of places.
That's
I mean,
the natural progression.
I've traveled,
though,
I've still
because
seen that.
Those long death counts are just
Oh no,
they're
no.
game killers.
This is not a case of we've made a mistake in how the game has changed. It's a case of they didn't anticipate what would happen when they wrote the book.
Yeah, I suppose I was trying to make the point to John, who made a comment about, you know, having missed 7-7, and you know, I just my earliest memories back in 2012, like I started Amtgard at the exact right time because I got just enough exposure to 7-7 to realize, wow, this is really awful. I'm not enjoying myself at all. Before they said, hey, we're play testing V8, and I happened to be doing it in a place where Sir Michael was playing, and he was a big fan of it, and he encouraged us to play with the new rule set, and it gave me a really great opportunity to find that, wow, this game can really be done right. And back then I had a, boy did I have a temper. I grew up in a very competitive household. It was not a great mentality, and when you end up getting knocked out of a game for a minute and a half for, you know, a silly mistake, it's real easy to get really mad at that. And as soon as we opened up the game and you're like, oh, okay, you pop after 10, 5, 15 seconds, like, oh, a death doesn't matter as much, and it's easy to get back into the game and get right back to having fun.
Yeah, no,
that was valuable for me.
I agree completely, but it is a design thing in that when they designed it, the assumption is death would be pretty bad.
Yeah.
I.e. worse than anything else, like CC. Because death is the penalty that every one of us can apply to another player.
Right.
There's plenty of classes that can't apply a CC effect. So when you get to the place where a CC is a worse effect to get than a death, then the rule set isn't balanced anymore. Right? They went out of their way to balance it around the idea that everybody who applies death is applying the worst penalty. And this is probably off topic from the Paladin thing a little bit, so I won't keep going on it. I've got strong opinions about this, but I'll let it go.
Yeah, I'll kind of finish it as like from a game design perspective, because we also have some master smiths in this thing. Is that you probably want to make death to be the worst thing that happens to you in a game, and that could be a death count, that could be a life pool kind of a thing. Or what you could do, which I've seen done, is in the specific games you play, you do half counts on everything, not just death, so that CC isn't the worst thing that can happen.
We do half count a lot at Mists.
Yeah, no, I think that's almost the bare minimum. If you're going to have death counts reduced, you have to reduce CC counts by the same amount, because then death is still worse because you've got to go to Nirvana or Repop or whatever that is, and back. So it's still worse than the CC. I agree with you that that's sort of the bare minimum, and we just have to balance. The good news is we're going to have the ability to edit the rules again very soon, which will make us more nimble to the fact that the V8 rules, which are very, very good, have had 8 years to develop, and we've metagamed them for 8 years. So they're not nearly as good as they were because we've found all the weaknesses and are all playing mostly in the weaknesses. We're not stupid. Okay, most of us aren't.
I'm the dumb one.
So we're going to move back to our questions. But we can come back to that topic afterwards when we're doing like hot takes and open discussion. This we hit on earlier, and this is something that I think is vitally important for the growth of Amtgard and for improvement as an individual. How do we get better, especially once, you know, we start having better stick skill, better battle game skills, you're better at the rule book, you know what's going on. How do we still continue to get better but not ruin people's fun on a weekly basis?
That's a hell of a question.
It is a hell of a question, but it's a legitimate thing, because if we have, you know, 3 people in a part going for Paragon, that means that one team is always going to have 2 of those people, and the rest of the players probably don't have the same mentality as them, and we need to balance that.
So I've got an ultimate hot take on this one.
Yes.
Paladin's a perfect class for it, because your job is to be effective on the field, but style is also important, And there's nothing more stylistic as a paladin than protecting and enhancing those around you. That's literally part of our ethos, right? So play up that part. Make sure you're especially visible as a paladin. You know, ham it up, as Jory said, with your role play to emphasize that, so that the monarch or the monarch's representatives or whoever might recommend you for Paragon and is watching sees that. Now, you're right that someone whose only measurement to make a recommendation for Paragon is, were they the MVP of that game? Were they the MVP of the next game? Were they the MVP of the next game? Right? If that's the only thing they're checking, they might not recommend you as much. But most people, that's not the only thing they care about. It's one of the things they care about. And you can certainly be the MVP sometimes and still get noticed for that. And then, you know, whoever's making these decisions sort of knows, yeah, that guy could be extremely good, but he's enhancing his team right now. He's not making as much of the beauty himself, but it's still pretty important. And I think Paladin is especially good for that. I'm not sure it fixes the problem completely. And the fact is, I think it's good that Paragon comes from the Monarchs, which means you can mostly do that Paragon work at your kingdom level events that are big enough not to be broken.
I have an anecdotal experience that to your point about our ethos of protection and enhancement of our friends.
I'm sorry, there's someone at my door. I'll be right back.
Okay.
This is so. The reason I bring up this point, couldn't real jokes. I asked this of anybody that is coming up in Warriors Paragon, which we now have our tactician path, which is kind of nice. Anybody that's coming up in skill in the game, and I believe it was I guess it was 2 years ago now. Belfield ran a how do you keep improving? Like, you can improve on every person class at SKBC about how to get better, even if the rest of the people at your park aren't, you know, the top-notch fighters you are. So
right,
this aspect of always trying to find a way to get better, even if there's no one of your level at your battle game, at your park or whatever, is an important detail, I think, so that we maintain a healthy park and we're not having, you know, 3 or 4 vets discouraging all the new players from ever coming out and playing again.
I've got 3 tacticians for Paladin.
Ta-da!
I think I have a 4th one laying around somewhere that I just haven't bugged Kendrick to put into my org.
So I have a couple. I have a couple of answers to this question. Number one is, if you want to suppose you're like in the situation where you're the best fighter at your park and you're playing Paladin, or any class for that matter, the answer is to nerf yourself. Like sometimes, and this is when I'm playing Wizard, for example, I know I'm going to wreck the field if I go ham. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on my throwing this time around. I'm not going to play Evoker Wizard. I'm just going to throw ice balls at people who are more than 20 feet away, because I'm going to work on my long range throwing. I'm going to spend at least half the game doing that. And I'm going to miss a lot and be a lot less effective on the field. So I'm still working on myself, but I'm also contributing to the team, and I'm not just destroying the battle game. Another, like, for example, for Paladin, you could say, like, I'm not even going to melee. I'm going to challenge myself and not melee fight. I'm going to use my support abilities. I'm going to use my javelins, but I'm not going to do anything else. And therefore, I'm still contributing to the team. I'm still getting better at learning to use all of my abilities, because there's a lot of abilities as a Paladin, and as you work, you're going to overlook them. The other thing I can say about how to help out is work to recruit and grow your park. Because if you grow your park, medium-sized battle games, even the best player is going to have less of an impact than in a small game. In a small game, one really good player can just wreck the field. The larger the game gets, the less of an impact that one player gets. So by growing your park, you're naturally going to circumvent that.
My point, and actually, I'm glad there's a couple of things in there you said that I actually am I'm glad you said mentioned. What I had ended up writing down for my answer to this was that our responsibility first and foremost is to be a good sport. Nothing improves ourselves and our gameplay as much as recognizing when you've made a mistake or when you've got a bad attitude or when you realize you need to tone it down, then to be a good sport. If you are wearing 4 points of armor, you're the best fighter or one of the best 3 fighters in the room, and you're running up on some kid who's only been playing for, a few weeks, you're not really being a good sport by running up and ruining their day over and over again. That's not fun for you. It's not fun for the new player, and it's not fun for the team or the game. Your best option is when you realize you're doing things like that, and this is the best option in my opinion, is you take on that role of defensive fighter. If I'm realizing that I'm destroying the game by fighting my ass off, I'll take a step back and I'll go, okay, well, maybe I'm going to stand back here by the wizard or the archer, and I'm going to make sure they don't get smote by the other team, because it's a little more fun for them. They're not going to get stabbed in the back a million times. The new player's not going to get smushed into the ground, and I get to enjoy the role of standing there going, I will protect this individual who cannot protect themselves. One example of this actually, while we were at a local park day, and I can't remember if it was Rayhawk or Kendrick or someone got legged by a new player. It was hilarious. But the veteran player was clearly a little frustrated by this because they were tired of getting stabbed in the back in the leg. It's not a very fun thing to happen. I walked up and I said, do you need protection? Are you okay? And I was very much not on their team, but I ended up standing by their side, defending them against my own team, protecting them and saying, would you like me to heal you? And I healed this person so they could get up and walk away and continue enjoying the game. And it felt very much, it was a silly moment. I was trying to bring myself back into this. I was trying to make sure that everyone was having a good time, but it felt very much like that was the most, that's my Paladin moment, was defending my enemy, healing them so that they could get back into the fun, and it didn't cost me anything but a couple of giggles, and that was cool.
And I'm gonna drop another role playing hot take here. If Paladin sort of exists as an archetype of a fighter for justice or ethical behavior or doing the right thing, promoting your park's health is the ethical thing. If you're not out there doing it, you're not being a good Paladin, or the sort of person I think ought to be a Paragon Paladin. And I'm not arguing that there's a piece of that that's sort of role-play nonsense, but a fact is, everything we do is sort of role-play nonsense, and I'm not willing to invalidate it on that basis.
On that note, if you're role-playing and trying to get Paragon Anti-Paladin, don't be like, well, listen to what Mikey just said. I guess it's my job to kill the boss. No, don't do that.
No, no. If you got to role play an anti-paladin, you need to role play being a difficult person to get along with in game, without being an a-hole in life. Because not only do people not enjoy hanging around with a-holes, but it's going to impact your ability to get any award, because the monarch who makes that decision doesn't like a-holes.
That should be the case. That is not always the case, but it should be the case.
A much higher than a majority of monarchs hold it against a-holes.
Yes, as they should.
Now, I have an anecdotal story that what's been said reminded me of, where we did the opposite once of what we were talking about earlier, and it actually turned out really well. And that is, once during the Phoenix League thing in the Rising Winds, when we were like every week we'd have a different Phoenix League thing in a park where the teams would fight each other. And Stack Deck was there, and we were dominating. And suddenly we found out that a group of newbies formed a Phoenix League team, and they said, we want to fight Stack Deck. So my team came up to me and they told me, like, hey, this team of newbies wants to fight Stack Deck. And they're like, should we do the all scout strategy? Should we, do this? And I said, no, we shouldn't. They didn't say they want to fight us fucking around playing scouts. They said, we want to fight stacked deck. We need to go ham against them. And we don't, doesn't mean we're like complete dicks about it. They want to see what, you know, the best team looks like. They want to see what that looks like. We need to show it to them. And that turned out really well. They all died horribly, but they died with giant smiles on their faces.
That's the end goal, isn't it?
That is a big. I think the biggest contributor to that would need to be communication.
Yeah.
If I were there, I would have wanted to communicate that. Like, I love that worked out for you guys, but that's one of those situations where it could have gone really poorly and you could have scared off a group of newbies forever. But what I would have done is, if I'd found out, I would have gone up to whoever they appointed their captain and I would have said, "Hey, is this what you guys want? We know that, you know, you asked us to fight. Do you want us to tone it down so it's fun and silly, or do you guys want us to spank you so that, you know, you can see what it looks like when we turn it on?" And I think it's, as with everything else in life, everything, it comes down to communication.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. The context was that, given the context of what they asked and all that stuff, I was of the opinion that we didn't even have to ask. They basically said, we want to fight stacked deck.
Oh, I can hear the scenario, and I can imagine the tone of voice that would make it abundantly clear. I don't doubt you for a moment. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no.
Me being me, I would have.
It's like if somebody says, "Hey, warlord, come fight." I don't ever fight them at half strength. They didn't ask, "Hey, warlord, come fight me at half strength." They said, "Hey, warlord, come fight."
It's a good point.
The only time
Oh, I was going to say, and of course, after you fight them and after you whip their ass, you're probably going to be like, "Okay, so this is how I beat you. This is what you can do to them."
And maybe offer them a beer too if they're of age.
Check that first.
Hey, we said how important communication is. Beer aids communication very often.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we'll move on to our next questions. These next three questions are a little more open-ended. They're less like informational, more opinions. There's been discussion about moving the way we level classes out of the like 52 points, so that it's not, you know, a full year almost of time that you're spending on a class, or half a year if you're going to a lot of events. Do you guys think leveling your class slowly is important?
So is the talk about speeding it up?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's awful fast already, but if that's the way we're going, the fact is we will then have a much bigger distance in your first question, right? You ask your first question, what's the difference between 6th level Paladin and Paragon Paladin? And for Paladin, it's going to go up a lot. For like Druid or Bard, who have huge lists of spells and lots of different interactions, it's going to go up even more. Because the fact is, to have the skill basis that it really takes to deserve Paragon, you have to have a lot of practice. And you're not going to get a lot of practice if you were to level, say, you know, in 3 months to 6th level. That's not necessarily unreasonable in terms of doling out the powers. I'm not opposed to that at all. But you're not going to be any better at using those things all together than somebody who'd played 3 months and gotten to 4th level today. Right? You'd have 2 more levels, so you'd have more powers, but you wouldn't be any better because it's the actual practice that makes that work.
I'm very much a practice person. Very much.
Yeah.
Like there are people in this room, John, who can read a class list and understand the minutiae of it in you know, a few hours. You'd have a good grasp of what's going on pretty quickly, even the more complicated caster classes. For me personally, especially with the with Paladin, I found that playing it every week and having my abilities, and by the time I was really comfortable with my abilities, hey, level up. Now I've got new abilities to add on. And I found that with Paladin specifically, our quote-unquote slow method of leveling was ideal. It helped me personally really grasp what my capabilities were. And there were some things I had to be reminded of, like awe. and how to really find the best use of my my immunities. But I really found a higher amount of success by going slowly as opposed to racing ahead to the finish line. It's I say the same thing about you don't want to jump into a high level game of anything else where you have all the equipment because you don't know what any of it does. You've got too many abilities and no experience with any of them.
For me, I'd say it depends on the person. Like, I've been playing this game for about 21 years at a max level in all the classes for about half that, and I pretty much have the rulebook memorized and I know what all the classes get. But for a new player, it's probably best and kind of challenging for when I was a new player. It was really exciting to gain a new level, even though I have to wait months to do it. But if I could push a button, I would probably make it so you level your first class slowly, but classes get some sort of mold.
And if we're hot taking on how AmpGuard organization would work, I'm going to throw out that the way to make leveling quicker, rather than changing the rule book and making leveling quicker, is to give more bonus weeks. Because in places where lots of bonus weeks or bonus credits are given, you're already leveling in 3 months. And those places you'll be leveling in a minute. Okay? And I think we can all sort of say, then why level at all? Okay? So instead, have those places that rarely give bonus credits catch up to the people who are currently giving a lot of bonus credits.
That has been a pretty big benefit to, I suppose, to the world of COVID is, when our local monarch says, hey, here's an extra credit day just because it's my birthday, or whatever the case may be. I've had friends down in Texas and Colorado commenting on my local parks page. They're like, hi, I'm so and so from XYZ. I would like my credit in this, and they answer the question of the week. And while it's not an ideal situation, I like
I love what you're saying there, because like all three of us gave opinions on this thing and they were all sort of similar. And if we're wrong, COVID will prove it to us. Because we've had a year with a reasonable number of opportunities for spare credits where nobody played at all. So what's going to happen is everybody's going to have 1 or 2 classes they've hardly played at all that they're 6th level in.
Not me. I've taken all my credits in Paladin.
Well, okay, but lots of people will, and so we'll measure and see how much it benefited them. Like this is a perfect petri dish to check our theory. Like I'm not saying I'm wrong. I don't know, but I love having a check to find out.
All right, so our next question is opinions on opening up Paladin and Anti-Paladin. At the recent Gathering of Clans, it was literally one vote. That was the only deciding factor, that we did not open up Paladin and Anti-Paladin this year. What are you guys' opinions on opening it up to the populace?
Yes.
So I'm heavily in favor, and I have a lot of arguments in favor. I could talk about this for a while, so I'll limit my soapbox to one argument. Restricting it tonight means that it's such a tiny percentage of the populace are knights. And there's a lot of that little tiny percentage of the populace that battle games. And the ones that battle game don't necessarily play Paladin or Anti-Paladin. So this has a pretty profound impact on the class itself. And I've talked about how Paladin is amazing because of all the things it can do, but none of those things are unique to the Paladin. The combination thereof makes the Paladin unique, but it makes them kind of unflavorful on the field. And from a rulebook writer's perspective, I would like to give Paladin abilities that are unique to them, special things that only they can do. We can have them fit into the rock, paper, scissors card hard counter paradigm of the game, built from the ground up to be a regular part of the game. Giving it a classic counters and then is in turn countered by. And none of that can happen while Paladin is locked. And that's my big argument to unlock.
I want to preface my statement with, I am absolutely in favor of opening it up, but I am not in charge of the decision, so I don't have to bear responsibility for it. My thoughts are, and for a while, what I realized is it came down to a sense of, and it's not a sense I'm necessarily proud of, but it's the honest truth is, I felt like a lot that came along with knighthood was additional responsibility. When I was elevated, everything, I had to shape up my attitude. I had to shape up my language, my behavior, everything. Everything I did had to be another. I had to climb the the ladder. I had to really make sure that I was being the best version of me that I am capable of being, and felt like for that effort I had very little to show for it. And so before I was elevated to knighthood, I was I was hugely in favor of like, yeah, let's open it up because everyone should get it all the time. And then I got to knighthood and I went, wow, this is kind of cool being able to play these classes. And it's like, it's the one cool thing, like the one really cool thing that I get that whatever. And I came to realize like, okay, I'm clearly of two minds about this. So I compromised with myself. And that's the reason I asked you guys about Crusader earlier was, we open it up, asterisk, where we legitimize Crusader and Marauder as classes in Amtgard. And so the only functional difference between Crusader and Paladin is the name. They're exactly the same. The credits are the same, but I get to use the word Paladin. That's the only difference, and that's a personal thing. And I can see you shaking your head, Will, and
no,
like, it's a perfectly valid, like I'm full of shit, but it's full of shit that I'm
So Jory, my journey with you on this has been many years longer.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time I thought back to myself as a aspiring knight or as a new knight, and how much I wanted to do it. And then for probably 25 years now, I've always said Michael Hammer of God is a paladin.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a battle game playing assassin, Michael Hammer of God, the paladin, is using assassin abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Hammer of God is not an assassin or an X or a Y or a Z. It's why 30 years later, Denny may have maxed every class, but there's one I haven't maxed and I'm never going to, because I'm a paladin. I'm not an anti-paladin.
I took one credit in Anti-Paladin, and it was like the very first week that they said, hey, here's a free credit. It was after COVID kicked in, and like, we're giving away credits. And I went, I'll take Anti-Paladin because it feels like this is the shadiest way for me to level that class up. And like, I even commented that in the group when I said it.
Anyway,
I
want to make a hot take though about Paladin then versus Paladin now, and Anti-Paladin, the limited classes then and now. When I started, knighthood was a grind, and not everybody made it, but it was a 3 to 5 year grind that not everybody
still a bit
made.
Of a grind.
No, but the deal is, it's now a 7 to 10 year grind or a 7 to 12 year grind. Okay, it's twice as bad at least compared to what it was when I got in. So the advantage of, hey, you get a little perk. It's not super cool, but it's nice, and we'd like to have a way that our game is tied to our award system and there's an actual interaction. All of the arguments in favor of keeping it restricted that used to be made are only half as good as they were 25 years ago, right? Because knighthood is so much harder to get, consequently so much rarer, as Denny brought up. It's one of those things where at this point, I think you have to really ask yourself, where is this advantage and how is it real anymore when there's so much on the other side? And I mean, I would even say it applies a little bit to the naming, not as much, because the naming you can sort of let it slide. But it's true that if you get a brand new player in Amtgard and ask them what their favorite archetype in role playing or video games or whatever is to help them choose, it might be assassin is number one, but it's probably paladin that's number one. And if it's not, paladin's definitely number two. They always want to be paladins, and you have to tell all of them, hey, 12 years later you can. It'll be a lot better. It'll be a lot better if instead you say, hey, you can be a Crusader right now and work your way up to Paladin, because then they get all the abilities and they can still work for it. So I'm not necessarily opposed to that take on it. I'm really not, but I think it's got to be opened, and it's not even close. And if you'd asked me this 15 years ago, and they did, I was not willing to take a stand because I hadn't decided.
Mm-hmm. I think part of it for me comes down to the bit of cue ball that rubbed off on me, the achievement hunter little bit that isn't a very large part of me, but is a little bit. Is that like, I feel like, I did the work, I want something for it, and I am in favor. Like, if they said tomorrow we're opening up Paladin and Anti-Paladin as soon as regular gameplay resumes, I wouldn't be upset about it. But I guess what I would want is like some additional signifier, like, oh, you could wear spurs. Well, spurs aren't actually conducive to running around on a battlefield. They're a safety hazard. So, but like, kind of
how about
Paragon's.
How about, here's my hot take idea. How about you make the Crusaders and Marauders, even if you call them Paladins and Anti-Paladins, you make them wear a sash. We're the only ones who get by without a sash.
I was working my way to that. That was exactly what I was going to say. Was maybe there's a new sash color for Paladin or for Crusaders, and maybe they don't do Crusader and Marauder. Maybe they just open up Paladin and Anti-Paladin, but Knights don't need to wear a sash. They can have the belt flag or the shield cover. Or
I'm not even really sure I'm down with that, because there's all kinds of other arguments.
No, I'm latching onto this idea, damn it.
In truth, I'm sort of willing to deal with whatever it takes to get this right, because it's time to open it up.
Yeah, I would agree.
So my rebuttal to Jory's thing about the Crusader and Marauder is mainly I agree with that. If that was what got the classes to be open, I'd agree with it. But this is me kind of putting the sender hat on, is that when we talked about this last, that was what was on the table. We're going to open them up. We're going to call it Crusader and Marauder. I think it was Guardian Marauder. People didn't like Crusader. And
understandably,
what happened was about several kingdoms said, well, I want to vote to open up Paladin and Anti-Paladin. I want them to have the name Paladin because of how powerful that is and is a fantasy trope. And I'm not going to vote for it unless it does that. So the compromise is actually less likely to pass than just opening up Paladin and Anti-Paladin.
So you feel like
I don't have to bear the responsibility.
So you feel like it failed because there were 3 choices last year?
No, well,
I understand there was only a yes/no vote, but people were saying no because I want it more. I want more.
So if you watch the
I listened to it, but it's been a year.
It's long.
Yeah, it's been a while. What I remember, and Merrick has watched it much more recently, so he might be able to correct me, is people were bringing up opening them up and calling them Guardian Marauder, and then a couple kingdoms said no, I want to open up with the classes, and then we're like, okay, let's vote first on opening them up and then decide on the logistics if we want to open them up.
If we open up Guardian, does that make me a member of Space Force?
No, but anyway, but that vote failed by 1, and a couple of the kingdoms who voted no because that wasn't what was put forward on the table. They didn't vote no, I don't want to open them up. They voted no for logistical reasons. So I think if an actual proposal was put in place, and we had the same monarchs.
yeah, we won't, obviously. That's why the COM makes decisions slowly and in its own way.
That's a whole different podcast discussion.
Yeah, no kidding. I'll stay out of that rabbit hole.
I think it would have a good chance of passing. But I think that opening up Paladin and Anti-Paladin actually has a greater chance of passing.
Well, but let's ask another question that I think we're going to get a pretty near unanimity. Do you think it's going to pass in the next 2 years?
Yes.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, totally. Looking at the way the kingdoms are running and pushing, it's going to happen.
That's right. I think it's inevitable. In fact, I thought it was inevitable in like 2010. In fact, would have guessed it would have happened by now, but I was wrong about that. But I thought it was inevitable quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Another opinion-based question. This is our last opinion-based question. Then we'll open up the floor for everyone else. this most recent Gathering of the Clans, which was, a little while ago, but is all recorded, so you can go watch the whole 12 hours of it if you really want. It's very long. They brought up a battle game night, and currently the award standardization survey is asking questions about the battle game night and people's opinions on it. What are your guys' opinions on a battle game night? Either the creation of a new belt or the path added to sword belt, where you can be a battle gamer and get sword.
So
I'll start, and
Okay.
I'll say that I think this one, like the one we just talked about, is going to happen. I'm now going to talk about why I think it's a really terrible idea, because I really think that battle games are where our newbies interact with us, and I do not want everybody to try and be their best self in such a way that it ruins battle games. I do not want I do not want all of the bitterness and anger and people who quit the fucking game over knighthood to come into every battle game, because then every new player has to deal with that shit. Okay? So instead of having some percentage of your veterans who are around the 4 to 5 year decide, and this whole fucking awards grind is stupid, I'm not having fun with this part of the game, so I'm leaving. They'll leave and they'll take 3 newbies with them because of their bad attitude on the field. And I'm not opposed to giving a knighthood for battle gaming, but we can't do it unless we have done something to fix the toxic elements of knighthood more than we have. And for many years, I've been well aware of the toxic elements of knighthood and been trying to figure out how to maximize the advantages, which I think are real, and minimize those toxic aspects. The other problem is the advantages of knighthood. The things I think that are really good about knighthood is that it drives people to excellence. That's less important than a battle game too, because you're already being driven into excellence in them by wanting to win, right? They're already competitive. You're already doing them. And you don't have to drive people to do more battle games, because in general, we do them every week. That is our primary interactive mode. So where there's an advantage to force people to strive for excellence in the arts, because a lot of Amp-Guarders aren't doing very much art otherwise. So you've opened that vista up to them. You've taught them they can be great at it. You can help them really achieve their best. That's less true of battle game. Now, again, I'm not saying there's no advantages to it, and I'm not saying there's not some arguments about, hey, we want to reward those people who are really good at X. And that includes battle gaming, because it's a very important part of our game. And that's why I think inevitably this is going to be a thing. And I hope I'm wrong. I really hope these things that I see don't become a problem when this inevitable change happens. So I'm going to urge everybody, be very aware in writing your proposal for how battle game knighting works, that you've got to make sure it doesn't ruin your battle games, because that's the lifeblood of our group. And if we can't recruit, I don't give a shit how many new guys who are fantastic battle gamers get their knighthood. If they're fancy knights in a game with a quarter of the people, it ain't worth it.
So I have a lot of opinions on this, so I'll restrict myself again. But the big one I have in favor, kind of the flip side of what Mikey said, is that class games are the primary hook to our games. First thing you'd see when they look at up Amp-Guard. So what we're seeing is the current generation of Amp-Guard is we have a lot of people who stay addicted to these class games. And many of our veterans, our core members, stop playing class games. Why? Because they want to be nice. They're running for office, making stuff. It's a huge time sink. And I see up-and-coming warlords sparring off to the side while class games are going on. So this results in a huge problem where the big hook of our game, the game part of our game, isn't participated in by the veterans of our game. That has a huge impact on our retention and recruitment, probably more than you think. But there's disadvantages of it too, as Mikey brought up. And I've seen the journey to knighthood described as toxic before. The closest example is how people cheat in tournaments to get warlord, but this toxicity exists in all paths of knighthood. I've seen people get upset all the time when they don't get what they feel they deserve for service wars. But we've definitely seen toxicity in the ANS community. So there's the argument that we don't want that toxicity, that hyper competitive, to affect our class game community. And I don't have a direct rebuttal for this because it is a legitimate concern. I'm not saying, oh, that's not going to happen, because it will, unless we are diligent about it as a culture. And Polaris, I think we all have it good, as all of our paths to knighthood, for the most part, lack toxicity. And if something bad happens, we come together as a culture. But like, we would really need to bake in honor and sportsmanship for our battle games, and we don't want to wait until it's a problem to fix it. We don't want to say, oh, our battle games are full of cheaters, what do we do to fix it? We want to head that off at the pass. We want to really push honor and sportsmanship as a...
And I will offer an... Sorry, you first.
I was going to say, to your point, it's a brief point. One of the things and this is a point of toxicity that we absolutely need to address, and it's not that we need to head this off before, or we can't head off battle game toxicity before it's a problem. It's already a problem. Already, I can already think of 3 or 4 pretty maybe not 4, 2 or 3 reasonably high profile individuals in our, in the tri-region area, who are incredibly well known for their battle game prowess, who are nasty cheaters, who are people who, are otherwise amazing at this, but they choose to make decisions that are dishonest anyways, that are skeevy in the same ways that we see people who are at that the on the warlord ladder, where they're getting towards that 5, 6, 7, they're starting to be on the radar, they're on the way, but you start seeing that there's a much higher there's lots more focus on them, and you can start to see, wow, that was pretty unclean. And the Reeve's not going to call that. We already have a problem with dishonesty in warlord tournaments. We have dishonesty on battlefield games, and we have Reeves who lack the spine to call anyone or hold anyone accountable.
Well,
okay.
I mean,
see, now that he's not here, he can't defend himself.
No.
Like, that's my biggest gripe.
It's the toxicity of knighthood. I mean, I'm on the path. I'm trying to go places. It's a thing I've noticed, and I think our best fight against it is to actively make sure the people that are on the path are aware that it exists and that they need to fight it, and that they need to hold each other accountable as much as possible. Like,
they've already tried doing that with people on the warlord path, and it's come with no results that I've seen. It's been a conversation for 5 or 6 years that I've been paying attention, that people understand, oh, warlords are toxic as shit when they're in the warlord pits, and there hasn't been a vast improvement that I've seen.
I've seen a vast improvement over.
Yeah, I think you may suffer from having seen it only after it's improved. Now, that's not necessarily fair, because we might like to see it improve more. I'm not ready to say it's improved enough. So your position is still valid. I'm going to throw a second piece on to the finishing part of your question, because I don't want to forget this. I think it's inevitably we're going to have battle game nights. I also think the right thing to do is absolutely, definitely to put them under sword.
Okay.
I do not think we ought to have a 5th, because if you've got a 5th, why not a 6th and a 7th and an 8th? And I truthfully think there should be only 3, but nobody wants to combine Crown and Flame except me. But there really should only be a limited number, and the idea of adding lots more when battle game nighting and tournament nighting are very similar. I think it's much better to put it underneath.
I have a controversial opinion that I think there should, instead of there being 3 or 4 or 5, I think there should be.
Kaads having a controversial.
Hold on. We had lag. I didn't hear Kaads' whole opinion.
I said instead of there being 3 or 4 or 5, I think there should be 1, because I just see a lot of confusion saying that like, oh, this person's a good flame knight, but they're not a good crown knight. In my opinion, there shouldn't really be much of a difference between the two.
Yeah. That's crazy, because if you're not qualified to be a knight, you shouldn't be a knight. And which one you get, or which ones you get, should be dependent on your masterhoods, and that should be an end of it. But that's a personal hot take, and I admit it. And I've used that word a lot. I admit it's because it entertains me.
It's a fun word. I love it.
But the fact is,
No more hot takes, only hot takes.
I would be willing to live with one. I don't disagree with what you're saying. Other than the achievement hunter mentality is real. I mean, we talked about Cue Ball's achievement hunter mentality. Joey was talking about it. And I've got enough introspection that I realized he's really talking about me, although he's actually talking about Cue Ball. Because if anybody's got the achievement hunter mentality in Amp-Card, I've got a bad case.
I know both of you, and you both have an achievement hunter mentality.
There's almost nothing out there available to get in Amp-Card that I haven't decided at one point or another I needed to go get. And I got most of them, and that's great. You know, people are motivated in whatever way they are, and I'm not ready to condemn my own motivation. I'm not sure that's a reason to keep them separated, so I'm not actually opposed to your idea of one. That might be too controversial, so I'm really interested in let's not propagate more, right? Yeah. I'm more interested in the things that I think are inevitable. I'm not sure going down to one is inevitable or even likely in the term of Amp-Card I can see.
And I'm not married to the idea. I'm just like more leaning in that direction, I guess.
Casual relationship with that idea.
Casual relationship.
It kind of comes to the idea that like a knight is a knight is a knight. We're really just making sure we know what you specialize in to be a knight, but we should hold all the white belts to the same kind of, this is your baseline, you gotta exceed. If you don't meet that baseline, maybe you should give up the belt. Like, I wish that was the terminology that we had.
And while we're throwing out, ideas from the madness zone, I fought real hard to have knighthoods expire. This is 16 years ago. So basically, the proposal I wrote then, my knighthoods all would have expired today. Okay? Because my knighthood expiration proposal is you need to do something that demonstrates you've still got a level of excellence in a field, or you oughtn't to keep the belt. And you got to do it once every 2 years. Okay? So if you got a sword belt, you ought to place in a tournament once every couple of years. If you got a flame belt, you ought to subcrat some major event once every couple of years. If you're crown belt, you got to hold an office that's worth a point in the old system every couple of years. Okay, and that didn't fly because lots of old knights were like, "Oh my God, I don't want to expire." and I'll be truthful. When I made the proposal, I knew I was going to have to push myself to hold on to my sword belt. Maybe not that year.
Belts who I wouldn't mind knocking out.
Maybe not that year, but some year, and some year not too far away. And I can honestly say I still like the proposal. I still think it's for the good of the game, and all of mine would expire now.
I disagree. You were king.
I could say well, he's king, but he probably hasn't placed in a tournament. But I could probably provide a reasonable solution to the old knights to say like, oh my God, I don't want to lose my belt. Have it so that you have to do something, or one of your beltlings has to do something with your guidance.
Oh no! I'm gonna fight against this only because of what I think is really the magic of Knight Squire and Amp-Card.
Yeah.
The true magic of Knight Squire and Amp-Card, in my opinion, is that it is extremely customizable. It literally belongs to that relationship, and what it means is up to those two people.
Absolutely.
And the minute you build any structure into it other than just the belts, you start having guardrails on that relationship that I'm not very excited about.
That's 100% true.
I have very strong ideas of exactly what I owe to my squires and what I ought to provide for them. And anybody who still knows how to find their way to ESAM can read them because I've published those fuckers. But I don't want everybody to feel like my way is the right way. And on top of it, there are plenty of people who do not deal with their squires in a way that I would, whose squires are very happy.
Yeah. Like
but I actually like the theory, other than it breaks this other thing I really love. And it doesn't matter. The expiring knighthood thing is me just dragging up old ideas because I still like them. But I'm aware, just like I say, I think that that opening up Paladin is inevitable. I think that we're almost never, it's almost impossible that we would see expiring knighthoods.
Yeah. And I would say that the Battlegame belt is inevitable, but instead of 2 years, I would give that about 10, because ward standardization takes a lot to change.
Yep.
Yeah, no. I think you're right that it's not going to happen nearly as fast. And maybe we can head off some of the problems that I think are very real, because I've already seen toxicity around Paragon. I don't think it's especially common, by the way. Not as common as knighthood, certainly, but I've seen it. So we need to think about right now, hey, let's make sure we're giving Paragons out in a way that does not promote toxicity. It's why I love that we talked about how do you take care of your small park and play to your best without hurting your park, because that's a key part of being successful as a game. And emphasizing that when we talk about how you're successful as an individual increases the chances. And I don't necessarily think that in the end, when we come up with a battle game night, that Paragon will officially be part of it. But almost by definition, the two things are related because they're both about excellence in battle gaming. So if we're talking about how to do excellence in battle gaming in a podcast about Paragons, it's very apt to consider, hey, what are the downsides of this? How do we mitigate any problems? Because the same problem is going to exist with a battle game knighthood.
Mm-hmm. All right, those are all of our questions. We went almost an hour past what I recommended.
Yeah. I should have known.
It's almost as if everyone here is long-winded and has a lot of opinions.
No, never.
I
would never get
prefer the word loquacious. I prefer the word loquacious.
Loquacious.
All right, so
my favorite word of the day from 6th grade.
We're gonna open up the chat. If anybody else has questions about Paragon Paladin, we're gonna do that. This is gonna keep recording, by the way. So,
or if you just want to say hi and tell Jory how cute he is, you could do that too.
That's another option. So,
gentlemen, you all look great.
Hi, Pat. You're really loud.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay. I can turn you down.
We'll fix it.
We'll fix it in post.
We can.
And by that we mean Merrick has to fix it. So carry on.
I don't have.
Oh, I bumped the button. Okay, I don't want to be focused.
I don't know when to be defocused. Does anybody else have any questions, concerns, or anything like that?
It looks like everyone is still muted.
You can unmute.
Oh, they can unmute. They can unmute themselves. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, we have the power. Just throwing that out there. I have a small tidbit on your battle game night. I know that's not Paragon Paladin.
That's okay.
Oh no, put it on the schedule. We got to talk about it.
Sweet. Anyone who writes up rules for that thing better damn well involve reaving. You should have to be a damn good reeve to be a knight of battle gaming. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's a good point.
Okay, because I can I agree with that, because I can think of someone in our kingdom who would really, really want to be a battle game knight and would make an awful one because he can't reeve worth a hill of beans.
But we already talked about the fact that if there's anything good about knighthood, it's that it drives people toward excellence, and if it drove that person toward excellence in reaving, I'm in favor of that. I'm actually pretty much down with it.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, I concede.
We have any other questions, comments, concerns?
Tell Jory he's cute.
Jory is cute.
I don't know. Kaads has got that red hat going on. He may be winning tonight.
That hat is good. That is a good hat.
I could get my dog over here and put him on as a hat.
I don't know.
Listen, dogs always win, but that's not you winning. That's the dog.
Yeah, Mister's the one
That's
winning
fair.
in that scenario. All right. If we don't have any other questions, I'm going to end the recording there.
Hey, buddy, come on. Come on. You can get in the shot. Come on.
We've got TR coming to join us in the last minute.
All right. Nope. I'm going to have to aim the camera at him because he's too lazy.
Oh.
Say hi to all the peoples.
Oh,
Say hi to all the
that's okay.
peoples.
We're just introducing dogs. Hop, come here, hop.
I'm
Hello.
really surprised that
Hello.
that my cat hasn't
Yeah.
photo.
Thank you.
Don't you have kitties, Kaads?
Yeah, but none of
Thank
them
you.
have
Okay,
photobombed this.
okay.
They usually do
Go to mom.
photobomb it, especially when I'm at work, which is
All right. That's fair.
I see
That's
Rune's
fair.
forehead.
Oh, we're going to see the kitty. There's the kitty.
Kitties.
Hi, Rune's kitty.
Isn't that Star-Lord? I think that's Star-Lord.
You're
So no,
muted
no,
right
no.
now, so we can't hear you.
It is indeed still. I almost hung up instead of unmuting this.
Star Lord.
I'm very happy to see a Star-Lord.
Uh,
All right. Well, I'm going to say thank you to everybody because I haven't had my dinner yet.
Yes, go eat.
Me either.
I'll be back in the channel in a little bit because I'll be doing editing and stuff and hanging out if anybody wants to do that. Thank you all for participating, and have a good night.
Good night.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
no,
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Paragon Path. Give us a like and subscribe, and if you're looking for more episodes, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any place that you can get your podcast from. We're going to try to keep going with a every other week schedule, so if you'd like to keep up with the live classes that will be happening on the Polaris Discord, please see the Polaris Facebook page, and you will find out when our next class is. Thanks.